Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show. Welcome to episode 189 of the Pathways to Success, where we help you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform with the world's greatest leaders. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have yet another outstanding show for you today. Today's episode is brought to you in part by City Central. City Central offers innovative workspaces for your business to thrive. City Central offers everything from private offices and co-working space to virtual offices and meeting rooms. City Central has 5 convenient locations in DFW, including North Dallas, Plano, Uptown, Richardson, and Fort Worth. If you use the promo code PATHWAYS, you'll get 50% off your first 3 months. So if you are looking for an innovative workspace for your business to thrive, visit citycentral.com for a free tour and use the promo code PATHWAYS for 50% off your first 3 months. So before we get kicked off, I got to give a huge shout out to everyone here tuned into the live stream. If you are watching this on Facebook, head over to YouTube, type in Julian Placino, the live link, and join us into the chat. That will be the best way to engage with myself as well as our featured guest today. And speaking of featured guest, I am very excited about our show today, and I'd like to play a short video to introduce him.
I love competition. I love watching my favorite college football team rally after being down 31 points at half to win the game in overtime. And I love watching someone like LeBron James put his team on his back and carry them to the NBA championship. I love watching people rise to the occasion and do what we think is impossible. Moments like that are what make competition so special. And it's about moments just like that in each one of our lives, because in it we discover what we're truly capable of. Everything in our being works together seamlessly. It's like magic. And we discover how much power we have within us. And it's always more than we think we do.
And it is my pleasure to welcome back to the Pathways to Success, Jake Thompson, founder of Compete Every Day. Jake, welcome back to the show, man.
What's
How are you?
happening, man? Good. It's been a while since we did the original interview back in the day.
It has been, and I made that post this morning, 2017. January 2017 is when I met you.
Man, it's been, I feel like that was a lifetime ago. Granted, what the last 12 months have been a decade and 12 months. So a lot's changed in 4 years. 4 years now, yeah.
Yeah. So catch us up specifically last year, because you have sort of a unique set of lens to go through such a crazy experience because of what you do. How was 2020 for you, Jake?
Started amazing.
Yeah.
As I laughed at the end of January, I had contracts and gigs set up that had already doubled what we did in 2019. So as a speaker, you know, it's a momentum game. And so when you feel like you've got the momentum rolling, you just want to keep that gas going. And then within like a month and a half, it was like dominoes falling one after another when events canceled. I got home March 13th from speaking in Omaha, Nebraska. I was supposed to fly out the next week to Indy, and then they just started all canceling for really the rest of the year. At least that's what it looked like initially. Fortunately, I have an e-commerce business, and as we know, e-commerce exploded even more so last year than it had been. And so while the speaking business was going through a major upheaval in March and April and even early May, the e-commerce business was taking off. And there was a number of factors that I think really helped us in that time capitalize on it. And so the year ended up going, at the end of it, looking back, much better than I anticipated. Speaking was not at all what we thought it was going to be. However, it was still a better year than we had the year before because I was able to pivot to virtual programs.
Yeah.
I still did some in-person programs at socially distanced events where people were checked going in, everybody was spaced out, you wore a mask. And so taking that combination really ended up having a good year and setting up 2021, which There's still so many unknowns for our industry and what's going to happen, but we're seeing events come back online. And so now it's, how do we get the momentum back, or how do we start it up again?
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, as a big aspect of what you're doing, being a professional keynote and a speaker, how was the transition to virtual? What did that look like? Where did the rubber start to meet the road with your clients?
Yeah, initially it was practice what you preach, because I watched $30,000 to $40,000 go right out the door within about a week period of having to cut checks back to clients for deposits they made.
Oh, wow.
And mentally, that's a beating. You get so excited, and then you get the rug taken out from underneath you. And so in that moment, it was like, what do I teach people? How do you control your controllables? How do you show up in times of adversity? How am I going to use this? And so I just started reframing my perspective to say, okay, here's 15 events or 10 events. That means I'd be on the road for 20 days, 24 days. How can I use these to build the business further? And so that's really what I focused on. My book was coming out later that year. We changed that whole timeline to fit earlier, knowing that people were kind of struggling in that same mental position. And so that was a big one. And then from the switching to virtual, I'll be honest, I hate virtual.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Me too, man.
As a keynote speaker, I want to see people. I want to talk to people. And for those that don't know, when you're watching a virtual presentation, I'm looking at a camera lens, even though everybody's faces on Zoom is down here. So you can't quite see the response initially. You have to stop and look at and deal with the chat. Whereas in person, you can see it, you can hear, you can kind of adjust. And so I've done more workshop-focused programs in the virtual setting. I do more sales trainings in virtual settings. We do shorter 45-minute ones. Whereas in person, I can do a 3-hour training, and we'll make it just roll and be fun. But nobody needs to be sitting on Zoom for 3 hours at one time. And so I've done more workshop-type programs, more tactical. The keynotes we've pre-recorded for the most part, and then I can actually sit in the chat box and talk to audience members during the conversation to further explain things or to add value to it. So that's been kind of a fun experience, but I'll just admit, in August I went and spoke at a school district in South Texas, and I was so excited to be on the stage, because you just didn't know when you were going to get to do that again. And I was like, I can't see your facial expressions. Everybody's got a mask on, but I can hear you and I can see you physically in front of me. So we're going to have some fun.
It's definitely a different experience in terms of the virtual and also the in-person. And 100% I agree with you on that. What are you seeing in terms of the future for speaking, given what's happening right now?
Yeah, I see events coming back online. A lot of my events from 2020 pushed to this year, intentionally trying to be in person. Some have already had to go virtual, so we're working on new dates to do virtual. Some are in person. And so I honestly think you're going to see a mix going forward. And it's funny because talking to other speakers, ones that have done this for 10, 15 years, they're like, I'm going to do all virtual programs, or I'm going to switch to where I'm doing 75% virtual programs. They said it'll drop their fee slightly. It's not a great reduction in fee because for our work is still the same. Preparing, rehearsing, putting on the performance, teaching is still the same. But they're like, I have 2 days I'm not on the road. I can be home with my family. I'm good. I'm going to do more of that. And so a lot of those guys really heavily invested into studios and their home studios to be able to do more live trainings. On my end, we're seeing clients just start to come back online, and there's still a lot of, we're planning for end of year. So let's talk, but if we have to go hybrid, what can you do hybrid? And so next year and going forward, I think you're going to see more virtual trainings available, which creates more opportunities for good speakers and teachers, because you have to be at a different level to do virtual. You just, captivating an audience is great, but when you're virtual, you have to do it differently because it's not the same dynamic. And so really good speakers are going to have an opportunity to essentially do more events. You could do 4 virtual presentations in a day and never leave your house. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. It's probably exhausting, but you could do it and then focus on other areas to build your business. And so I think you're going to see a little bit more. I also think this space of how everything's gone with everyone being on Zoom and virtual and having to do conference calls and presentations on virtual, I think, one, there's a little bit more grace to everyone on virtual. You know, you think about 2 years ago, if your kid walked in or a dog barked in the background and you're trying to do an online training, somebody's like, man, this guy's really unprofessional. But now they're like, I get it. My kids won't stop screaming. Like, they understand it. And on the same side, I think they have much more respect for people that can teach and speak effectively because they've been sitting through Zoom presentations with coworkers or other people, and it's on and on and on. And it's not that person's fault because they've never trained it. They've never practiced it. It's my profession, so I'm rehearsing and working it all the time. But I think it creates a whole new dynamic of, man, this is actually something we should pay people to do because they create an experience. It's like you go from the guy that sits in the baseball stands is like, I could hit that fastball, and then you put them in the box, say, okay, cool, hit the 90 mile an hour, and they're like, I'm not ready for this. So it's that dynamic. So I think you're going to see more virtual programs. I think groups are going to do hybrid, but I think the speaker side, it just opens us up to create more products and touch points for companies of like, your budget's smaller, let's do virtual programs. Yeah. You're doing an in-person event, let's go.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, very, very much like what you said. It's in my business, it is less about the big conference keynote and more about productizing your content. Yeah. And that has actually been very successful for me as well. So I'm curious, amidst everything that happened in 2020, when you look back at like life lessons and career lessons and business lessons, what was your biggest takeaway of how you have emerged stronger, and what can our audience learn about that?
I think the biggest lesson I took away from last year is the importance of focusing on what's in your control and taking agency of that, ownership. And I say that because if last year wasn't a lesson in life is outside of your control, you can't control a pandemic, you can't control mandates, some states are open, some states aren't, it's just where you live. You know, your jobs may suffer, this person's job may not. It's really like, how do you every day wake up, ask yourself, what's in my control? How can I make progress with it, do the best I can, and not allow everything outside of it to distract us, which it can. It can become an excuse for anything, any day. And so for me, it was, what can I still do? How can I reframe my perspective, not to false positivity as everything's hunky-dory, everything's perfect, because that's pretty toxic. But here's the realism of the situation. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Speaking is, we have no idea what's going to happen. What's still in my control? Well, I can still do this, this, and this. So today I need to wake up and just focus on this. And I know that's some of the things we'll talk about today, but really it's the idea of controlling your controllables and making the most of it instead of our default, which is allowing everything outside of our control and beyond our grasp to distract us or derail us from where we need to go and what we actually need to get done.
Yeah. Jake, the show is called The Pathways to Success, and what I love about featuring individuals who've done great things is sort of their story and the lessons that we could capture from it. So I'm curious, if there was a genesis point that you could point to, perhaps in your youth or whatnot, that was a formative experience to be like, hey, this is where I started becoming who I was, what is that for you, Jake?
Man. So for me, it was probably working in gas stations. So my dad,
in gas
I
stations?
did. So my dad had a small little chain of Diamond Shamrock gas stations, and our hometown was 13,000 people, so small Texas town. And I was like 7, 8 years old, working in these stores in the summers and on weekends. Like I would get up and open the stores on Friday morning sometimes. And I remember working in them, and especially early on, it was just like one lesson after another, and you don't ever want to hear mom or dad like continue to tell you lessons. So like looking back, I'm like, these were crucial for me. But I made two things that I learned very early on. The first is I was in a rush to clean the parking lots. Like when I was clean the gas pump, sweep the parking lots, I was how fast can I get it done, not how well can I get it done.
Yeah.
And so I was always, I was that little kid with that big broom running through the parking lot, sweeping everything. And Dad would always go inspect the work, and he would make me go back and redo it if it wasn't spotless. And I was like, it's just trash in a parking lot. He's like, no, like it's doing the work to the best of your ability, regardless of what you want to be doing otherwise. And I remember that because I always wanted to be out with friends. And he's like, you're doing this work, do it to the best of your ability. And when you're done, then you can go take care of that. Wherever you are, whether it's an internship, whether it's a job, whether it's even doing work within something you love, even if you don't love it, do it to the best of your ability. And so that one always stuck with me. And then the other one is I remember watching him jump in some Saturdays, and he would help stock the cooler, change the box for the Coca-Cola machine. And I was like, why are you doing this? You're paying me, you're paying these two people behind the store register. Why are you doing this? And he taught me the importance of modeling the example as a leader. He said, there's too many leaders today that will tell you what you need to be doing and why you need to be doing it, but they'll never model that standard of behavior themselves. And he said, I want my team to see that if I ask them to do something, it's because I'm willing to do it too, and I just can't right now. And so when they see me jump in and fill ice and do all these little things, fix gas pumps, they're seeing me model the standard. This is how we do things. If Steve, who owns the store, is willing to do it, it's not beneath any of us to do it. And so those two really stuck with me, that nothing's really beneath you as a leader. You always have to model that behavior. And then whatever role you're in, wherever you find yourself, do it to the best of your ability, because honestly, it's the only way you'll earn the opportunity and right to do what you want to do. Unless you do your best where you don't want to be, you really don't put yourself in a position to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. I love that. And Jake, you're a third generation entrepreneur, is that right?
Yeah, so my mom's dad was a West Texas farmer.
Yeah.
He had farmland outside of Lubbock, and then my dad's dad was a contractor. And so he had a little contracting business, construction business, all his life. He actually had a Garland, which is funny because 635, my dad would laugh that they would go across 30 all the way to like West Fort Worth, and he'd be in the back of a pickup truck with his brother going to these job sites in the summer to work construction with their dad. And now you think about 30 and 635, you're like, that's crazy, riding in the back of a truck. But he's like, oh, that's what we did. And so then, my dad had gas stations. And so I always kind of had that bug of, I want to do something on my own, or I want to do something with freedom, because I watched my dad would make my sports games growing up. Mm-hmm. For the most part, he was at all Little League, or he was a coach, or just little things like that looking back, I really didn't appreciate as much in the moment as you did later in life. But I was like, that's what I want, because I just want the flexibility to travel, or when I have a family, to be there for those special things.
Yeah, I love that. So one thing that I found really fascinating about your story, the reason why I asked that question is because I know when you graduated from college, you actually tried to find a job.
Oh, yeah.
But you could not.
Yeah, no.
And you were sort of forced and thrust into entrepreneurship out of necessity.
Yeah.
Tell that story.
One of the better and worst experiences of life. So I knew early on I wanted to be Jerry Maguire. Sports agent was what I wanted. And so I went from TCU immediately into grad school at the University of Dallas in Irving. They're the only program that had a sports and entertainment MBA. Mm-hmm. And at that time, the National Football League had just changed their certification that said you need a law degree or an MBA. And I'm like, 1 year earlier, I would have been fine. And so I went right into grad school. I was interning with an agency, followed that agency and stuck with the agent for a couple of years, and was like, I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. And so 2 weeks before graduation, I kind of left the agency, which I was commission only, so it's not like I was leaving anything really on the table. And I couldn't get a job. It was fall of 2008. Economy sucked. I have non-traditional work experience for the last 4 years. I have an MBA. So entry-level jobs aren't looking at me because I have an MBA. Anything with experience is not looking at me because I worked in the agent world and I was recruiting and marketing and doing non-traditional stuff. And so I just kind of had to freelance. I couldn't get a job. I spent some time substitute teaching in Coppell.
Really?
I did. I would sub a few days a week because I was like, well, maybe I want to go into coaching and coaching football. But it was kind of like, I'm just trying to figure this out. So I subbed a little bit. I started building a marketing consulting business until that kind of took off. Started working with some international companies, some small local companies, did anything from graphic design to early social media strategy of just create content. Like everything that you understand to do is how do we create content to teach and educate. That's what I worked with clients on. And I did that for a handful of years, and it was great that I never had the traditional 9 to 5 because I just was ignorant enough to think I could just roll in and do whatever. But it was also like a learning experience. And so that ultimately started everything that eventually got me on the path to compete. But yeah, I never really had that traditional 9 to 5. The closest I had were a couple of long-term contract roles. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of like employee-ish, but I was still on contract, so I was doing a million other things at the same time. And there was no structure, no manager, no mentorship. So I was always kind of like learning by sticking my hand in the fire. Like that was pretty much it, is like learning trial by fire for the most part of this works or this doesn't. What else can I consume from a content or people standpoint to figure out how to do things better?
Yeah. So before we take a quick commercial break, I want to ask you this. If there was one lesson that your life represents, having gone from struggling to find a job to selling shirts out of the trunk of your car to building this e-commerce brand to now becoming a keynote speaker speaking around the world, what's the thing that you think all of us should take away from your life?
The importance of trying to help another. And I say that because all of my work initially early on in my life was how can I do more for me?
Yeah.
And then starting Compete was how can I empower other people? And that really changed everything from a perspective, from a life standpoint. You think about Zig Ziglar's famous quote, if you want to be successful, help other people find success, essentially.
Right, yep.
And that's the core basis. And the more I found I've lived that path of not what's in it for me, but how can I help you, the better outcomes I've found along the way, which goes against most of our society these days about go get yours versus go help someone else get theirs and you'll be fine.
I love it. I love it. Jake, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our commercial sponsors.
You want to transition out of your career and do something tech related. CodeUp is the place for you. When I came to CodeUp, I was actually working at a chain hair salon. It was just starting not to be for me anymore. My goals were to never work a weekend ever again, to have full health care and benefits, and to just have more time with my son. And now I've met all of those goals. I don't have any regrets. I just regret not coming sooner when I saw those billboards when I was driving down the highway.
And we're back with Jake Thompson, founder of Compete Every Day, and his keys to success. So Jake, before we jump into your keys to success and learning about these points that you want to share with us today, I have a small gift for you. As a token of appreciation for coming back onto the show, of course, courtesy from our sponsors, Dead Soxy.
Awesome.
So thank you very much.
Thank you so
Jake.
much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Oh man, perfect. Almost a match. Looky there. Looky there. Awesome. Thank you all so much.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on the show. And of course, thank you to Jason Simmons and our friends at Dead Soxy. So Jake, one of the things that you are a true expert at is developing a winning mindset. How do you want to start us off with that?
Wow. I think the biggest first piece of building any winning mindset is determining our focus.
Yeah.
And I say that because that's part of our controllables. The 4 controllables, when I referenced it a few times, is actions, attitude, effort, and focus. Regardless of what goes on in the world, we still determine those 4 things. What attitude we show up with, what effort we give, what actions we take, and where we choose to focus. And the mindset piece, growth mindset, believing in this ability that you can always learn and develop something. You can grow. You're not stuck. You don't have this fixed persona or skill set, is key because you start focusing on where are my opportunities to grow? What am I looking for? And really our key to success this time of year, because we're, late March, mid-March, New Year's resolutions went out the window 3rd week of January for most people. 84% of people give up on their resolutions by January 21st. So at this point, most people are not even thinking about, man, this is what I wanted to do for 2021.
Yeah.
They're done with it. And so they just don't start again. Where what we should be asking ourselves is, what can I focus on doing today that takes me a step in the right direction? And what we find is winning mindsets are like muscles we build in the gym. They're done one choice at a time, one rep at a time, one day at a time. It's not magic, flip a switch, I'm suddenly mentally tough, or I'm suddenly stronger mentally, or I'm more successful, I have a growth mindset. It's what can I do today to be a little bit more like that? And we start stacking those days on top of each other like Lego blocks. And so the biggest thing is focusing on today, learning to essentially be where your feet are. Because when we focus on where we're trying to go, a lot of times we get discouraged by that gap between where I am today and where I want to be. And we see how far it is or how hard it's going to be, and we start to check out. But when we focus on what we're just doing today, it's a whole different mentality. We talk about it in my book of this idea of day one. And if you think about somebody that's going through, say, Alcoholics Anonymous, they're really focused on how can I just do today well. If we think about your first day at a new job, everybody's excited. It's a new job, new opportunity. You're nervous, you're excited, you're going to do the best you can. Day 100 to 200, you're like, I'm just going to kind of mail it in. Day 1 at the gym, you're excited. It's a new workout program. How can I go? Day 15, you're like, I'm going to hit that snooze button and sleep for another hour. Like you start to check out. But day 1, you're always into it. And so how do we focus on making every day our day 1? Doesn't matter what happened yesterday. I'm not worried about tomorrow. I'm just focused on how do I make the most of today. And so I think that's the key foundational piece to building anything, especially that winning mindset.
Yeah. Jake, I'm curious about your own personal mindset, because you have just like this unbridled sort of like energy and enthusiasm. It emanates from you. Like, would you say you were born with this? Did you practice it? Did you cultivate it? Like, tell me about that.
That's a great question. I actually have never thought about it. I've always had the outspoken energy, I think. Part of it is just I love to win. I want to see other people win. I think as I've gotten older, I've been better at channeling it. I had ADHD as a kid, so bouncing off the walls was part of it.
Okay.
I've never taken medication. So you compare that with entrepreneurship, it's like shiny object syndrome everywhere, which was majority of the first 10 years of business. It's how do we try all these different things? And so essentially, if you've ever, I'm blanking if it's Essentialism by Greg McCowan or The One Thing, but if you take like an object and you take a bunch of arrows off of it as energy, I'm sure you've seen this graphic before, you're trying to do 50 different things. Sure. Each arrow is only about this long. You can only do so much if you're doing 50 different things, but if you put all your energies and effort into one direction, you can skyrocket. And so what I think has happened is over the course of the years, and especially probably right before we met, to now, I've just started been cutting out how many arrows are going out and how much sharper and tighter that focus is. And so for me,
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of understanding what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, getting little hints of success along the way. It's those little hits of motivation when this is working, let's build on it, that I think all help that. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's really easy for me to have energy and passion when I'm not worried about me. And I say that because as a speaker, your goal on a stage, for a lot of people, they're like, I will never step on a stage and speak in front of people. It's my biggest fear. Because we're worried, what am I going to sound like? What if the audience doesn't like me? You know, what if I bomb? It's all about me. But when you step on stage, your goal is to be in service of the audience. That's where your focus is. And so you're not really worried about you. You're like, how can I add value to them? How can I enhance their experience? How can I teach them? And so life has a magical way, or our bodies and minds have a magical way of when we take the attention off of ourselves and put it onto others, it changes how we show up. And there's a guy, I was actually researching an article because I'm speaking next week, and we're talking a little bit about the Navy SEALs and Hell Week. And they go through this thing called surf torture. And you've seen pictures of it. Navy SEALs are linked arm to arm, laying on the beach, tide's coming up. And this guy did the experience, and he talked about it. He said, you are terrified you're going to wash out to sea. You're scared you're going to lose. You're thinking to these guys to your left, right, please don't let me go. Please don't let me go. I don't know if I can do this. And he said, when you start to make the shift to please don't let me go to I'm not going to let you go, and you start thinking about the team versus just yourself, he said you can get through it. Because you stop having the anxiety and fear and everything about what's going to happen to me and just say, I'm not letting you go, and your concern goes for others. Your strength comes in, you're able to withstand it, you get through it. And I found that so fascinating because it was a great description of how I see my work in life is how can I be in service to others? And the more companies and teams and individuals I can help, the better opportunity they have to go help others. And I'll never see that impact, I'll never see that ripple effect, and I'm okay with that. But it just helps me really focus that energy in instead of putting it everywhere, trying to do everything. It's all in one direction.
I love that. Yeah, 100% the focus, and you become a force multiplier because of it. So back to this idea of a mindset, right? There may be some people thinking there's nothing wrong with my mindset. So I'm curious, what are symptoms of someone who may need a reframe, who may need to expand their mindset?
If you're guilty of making excuses and allowing yourself to make excuses, if the idea of accountability scares you. And I say that because accountability, for a lot of people, they see it as a bad thing, as discipline. When actually it's the best sign of love you can have for someone, because it says, here's the standard we agreed upon. I'm going to hold you to it. When you fall short of it, I'm going to call you out because I love you enough that I want to see you succeed. And so if you're someone that is afraid of accountability, there may be an issue with your mindset. Carol Dweck in her book Mindset does a phenomenal job explaining fix versus growth. growth mindset or let's start with fixed first. Fixed mindset is the idea is how I was born is how I'll always be. I was not born smart, I can never get smarter. Criticism and feedback are things to avoid and run from because maybe it's a shot at me as a person or my identity and my character. I can't grow and develop. Obstacles and adversities are things to run from. They're problems, avoid them at all cost. Growth mindset, and what Dweck found is more successful people have this growth mindset, says challenges and obstacles are things that make me better. Me going through this, encountering this, learning to overcome it gets me out of my comfort zone and makes me stronger. It's not what I was born with, it's what skills do I choose to build. May not naturally be good at math. How can I learn and get smarter in math right now? By teaching myself, by working with a mentor, by studying, all of these things. Criticism and feedback actually help me get better because it builds my self-awareness, which eliminates blind spots that we all have.
It sounds like in pursuit of that, you have to inevitably face your fears. So I'm curious, Jake, how does Jake Thompson react when it comes to fear? What is your process?
So I used to believe the idea that we should be fearless.
Yeah.
Like you should fearlessly pursue everything. And over the years, I've learned that that's a bad piece of advice and it's a bad focus because doing anything meaningful, anything outside of your comfort zone, fear will always be there. Without fear, there's no courage. Courage cannot exist. You cannot be courageous unless you are afraid.
Yeah.
And so for me, facing fears is kind of an inner dialogue process of understanding what am I really afraid of. Like when I get those gut feelings and that stomach twist and you're like, oh my God, I don't really want to do this. I'll actually sit down and write down things. And I'll write down like what is actually bothering me. Like, am I afraid I'm going to bomb in front of the client? Am I afraid that I'll never speak again? Am I afraid that I'm going to give somebody bad advice? What am I actually afraid of? And then I ask, okay, so if that happens, what's the worst thing in the world that would happen? And it's never going to be the worst thing in the world. Like we have our biggest fears are never really the thing that actually happens. And so writing it down helps me, I would say for the most part, make it less scary.
Yeah.
The big scary monster in the closet's a little less scary when the closet door's open, the light's on, and you draw it on a piece of paper. And so I write things down, and then I start to think of, okay, so if this happens, what will I do then? And then you start to create your plan of like, okay, now I'm a little more confident, I'm a little less fearful, because if this happens, I already know I'm going to do X and Y. And if this over here happens, we're going to do A and B. Here's how we're going to adjust. Because the way I look at it, there's no quitting, there's no backing down. You work through it. And having someone that's working on developing a growth mindset, every opportunity is just an opportunity to get better. Every obstacle is just an opportunity to learn something new. I mean, that's competition.
Yeah.
I love to compete because you win or you learn what it takes to win. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to hold the trophy. They want to be successful. They want to be great. Not everybody's willing to compete for it because not everybody's willing to say, I'm afraid and there's a chance I'm going to fail. I'm still going to do it anyways.
Yeah. I love that. You're sort of kind of analyzing the fear, breaking out contingency plans for it, and it makes it less scary when you sort of voice it out there. And then you take action in that direction and then proceed accordingly.
Yeah, and I think writing it down it cannot be emphasized enough because a lot of us try to do all this in our head.
Yeah.
We try to do everything in our head, and I mean, there's a million messages hitting us every day. I mean, right now, if you're watching this live on YouTube, you probably have recommended videos on the side column. You've got other things at the bottom. You've got your phone beeping. You've got a million distractions trying to invade your thought space. So what you thought you might write down later, you don't ever actually get to. So writing it down helps pencil it in a little bit more to memory. And then from there, it allows us to, one, make it less scary, and two, start adapting plans off of it. And unless we make a plan ahead of time, unless we're proactive in saying, if this happens, here's how I'm going to respond, then this is going to happen and we're not going to know how to react because our mind's going to be anxious, we're going to be worried, we're going to be running through a million scenarios versus saying, this happened, here's what I already said I'm going to do. Pivot, let's go.
Yeah, I love that. We talked about focus and the importance of it, but how does one determine where they should deploy their focus?
I would say trial and error is a lot of it. I mean, and honestly, that's kind of it. I mean, if you look at, I've been in business 10 years as of May. It'll be 10 years. I've only been speaking for the last 4. The early 6 to 7 years of my business were like this. Like we would try a million different things.
Yeah.
And so my focus was running all over the place because I was trying to figure out what worked and what I enjoyed doing. I was trying to find that Venn diagram to say, here's what I do well and enjoy doing. Here's what works. Where do they overlap? And so we would try a bunch of things. They would bomb, they would fail, they would not work. They might work a little bit, not enough. So we just keep adjusting and pivoting. But what I found is I sit down every year and I write down, what's my goal for this year? Where do I want to go? What's the end result? Okay, if that's the end result, what can I work backwards on to get there? And I think Jay Papasan and Gary Keller at The One Thing have a beautiful tool for this called the GPS tool.
Yeah.
And you write down your goal, you write down the 3 priorities that want to get you to that goal, and then you create 5 strategies for each priority. So what you've done is you've taken this elephant-sized goal that you have, and you've broken it down into teeny tiny bites, because we eat an elephant the same way we eat a donut, just one bite at a time. It just may take more bites. And so for us, it's determined where do you want to go? It's where are you trying to do? And then just work backwards. And honestly, the easiest way to start, say if I want to be there in 5 years, if I want to be debt-free in 5 years, what's the one thing I can do today that's going to put me in a better position tomorrow? What's something I can do today? And maybe it's, you know what, I'm going to cook my own lunch instead of eating out. I'm going to take the 10 to 15 bucks that I spent at Chipotle and I'm going to put it into a new savings account. It's small. It's not going to make a magic difference overnight. But you answer that question every single day, it starts to add up over time. And so if you train your focus to know where you're going, to kind of understand where you're going, but really put your focus where your feet are and just say, what can I do today to be in a better position tomorrow? You get proactive with it. You become intentional with it, which most people don't. Over time, you put yourself light years away because of the power of compounding interest. One stacks on another, and eventually you hit a tipping point and everything takes off in the right direction. It's 2 coworkers side by side. They eat the same, they work the same, they have the same lifestyle, except coworker B decides every morning before work, I'm going to get up and go work out for an hour. That's it. 4 months later, you don't really know a difference. 10 months later, you can kind of tell a difference between the two. 18 months later, coworker B looks dramatically different than coworker A, and the only thing they changed is every morning I get up an hour before work and I go work out. We eat the same, we live the same, everything else is the same. But that one subtle decision that was a can't-see choice to get up every morning created can't-miss results over time.
You referenced the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, incredible book. Well, the one thing I got from The One Thing was the focus question.
Yeah.
And the focus question was, what's the one thing such that by doing, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary?
Yep.
And in Gary Keller's case, I think it was writing the book, he basically created the blueprint of how his agents could sell $1 million real estate business and whatnot. I'm curious, what was that one thing that you discovered in your business?
That was the one thing that made it easier. For me, there were multiple.
Yeah.
And I'll say that because everything has a season. So the first was fully committing into the speaking world.
Yeah.
Because my team, for years, we've sold apparel, and my team was like, we're selling a lot of the same shirts as other people. What separates us is your messages empower people, which you create, and you telling the story. So you need to go tell the story more. And I honestly kind of pushed back here and there, and we worked on a few things, and I still tried other things, but ultimately it was like, this is the direction.
Why did you push back on it?
There were a few reasons. One, it's probably the thing everybody goes through. Same thing I went through with the book. Somebody's already said this. There's other people out there doing this. I don't have as a speaker, I don't have some crazy story where I was homeless, OD'd on drugs. Like, I don't have any of that stuff. But I started to see the opportunities that when I got asked to come speak, I'm like, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
I can touch people differently than I can just selling them a t-shirt or publishing something on social. So maybe there's something to it. And after a couple of speaking events, 2 of my audience members or the clients that hired me said, you need to do more of this. And I laughed when I told my mom this, and my mom was like, oh yeah, your pastor and youth leader back when you were a kid always said you were going to be a pastor. And I was like, they don't know what I'm doing on weekends. I'm not going to be a pastor. But it's funny how I'm essentially on stage. And so once I committed into that direction, I invested a ton of money working with a coach and program, spent more money working with a different program on the business side. I said, I'm going all in. This is the direction. What that did at the time is my business dropped in 17 and 18 because I took all of my focus and energy out of what we were doing, selling t-shirts at events, working CrossFit events, all of that, and put all of it into building the speaking business. And what I found was it wasn't a dip down, it was actually more like a slingshot pulling you back because the last 2 years have been dramatically better. we have, far and away exceeded expectations because our messaging is better, because I'm saying it all the time, speaking it on stages. Our company is more equipped for craziness of 2020 because I have speaking, I have a book, I have apparel company, we have a few other things kind of being built in the background that give us touch points that maybe you just want a book. It's $15, cool. Well, then you like it and you're like, man, I'm gonna live this, I want a t-shirt. Well, then I'm working at an event, you need to come talk to our team about what you said in your book or what this shirt says. And so then it creates all of these touch points where I can really help people. And so for me, the first one thing was speaking. And it was all in, spent 5 months going to Philadelphia for 5 to 6 days at a time, plus paying for the actual program. So we invested a ton there. And then once I finished that and started speaking, the one thing became the book, because I started getting opportunities, and then I would lose opportunities because I didn't have a book. It was like, hey, meeting planners would be like, we love your content. We think you would be great for our event. But our CEO or this person wants someone with a book, because we want to give everybody a book. And so we're going to go another direction. And competitive side is like, I'll see you next year. And so that became the one thing. I have to get this book done to take speaking to where I want to go, to take the company to where I want to go. And so those pieces have kind of just all built on top of each other. And so the one thing is still my mission: encourage, empower, and equip people to win. But the smaller one thing, all in on a season until it's done, and then we shift and we go all in on another season.
Okay, then that is a powerful, powerful story, like a huge testimony really to this idea of the one thing, right?
Yeah.
It was the speaking, and then it was the book, and then it's what is it now, Jake? Like, first off, what is your goal? What's the big thing that you're working towards?
The big goal is a media company. Essentially, that's the only way I can describe what we do, because it's so diverse. We have the book, we have the speaking, we have the apparel. I do a little coaching here and there for sales teams or leadership teams. But we're working on a little planner that's designed to reinforce some of this stuff. And then book 2. My goal is, starting kind of now, it's every 24 months, have a new book that kind of builds on the previous. So the first book is all about building you. How do we build our mindset? How do we build our lives? Second book is focusing on how do we build ourselves and others? And then how do we build our teams and our culture? So they're designed to kind of stack so somebody can work their way through it intentionally, because all we want to do is the more people that I can encourage and equip to go win, the greater impact they can make on the people they interact with. And that, at the end of the day, is all I care about, because there's enough going on in the world negativity-wise, or people that just don't believe either they have what it takes, they can succeed, life works against them. The more people we can empower to say, you have more power in your ability than you believe you do. And I'm not trying to say you manifest it and anything else. I'm saying your ability to make the right choices every day can dramatically change your life. Here's choices we recommend you make based on what we see. Here's ways you can make them every day. That will change someone's life. And if you can change one person's trajectory, they're probably going to change others.
So we have a few more minutes left in the show, and we'll be closing here shortly. So I'm curious, with that sort of archetype in mind, the individual that you're looking to help, what is the one message you would want to share with them now to help them achieve their goals?
The easiest thing I would say is to start small. Like the one thing, when you hear me talk about mindset, grit, we talk focus, account, like everybody wants to go big. That's why New Year's resolutions fail. We go big. We've got to go small. Say, what can I do to put myself in a better position tomorrow? The idea of competing every day is not me versus you. It's me versus who I was yesterday. How can I be better today than I was yesterday? If I quit on a workout a rep short because I got a little tired, how can today I make sure I do all 10 reps? If I was poorly prepared for a sales call with a client, how can I wake up today and say, how can I be a little more prepared with it? And I want people to see that the power comes in their small choices. It's the teeny tiny choices we make every day that create our can't miss results. Most people are only obsessed with the end result, the outcome, the victory parade, everything that you see from a social media standpoint. But what they fail to realize is that outcome is the result of the process. And the process is little bitty, teeny tiny choices that we don't think anything about in the moment, but add up over time. They create life-changing results. So ask yourself, what's just one thing I can do today to be in a better position tomorrow? Never worked out? Go walk for 15 minutes outside today. Been drinking every day because you started a COVID happy hour like a lot of us did? How can today, instead of having 2 drinks, I just have 1? Or maybe I just don't have 1 today. And then worry about tomorrow. Just focus on winning today.
Jake, I have to tell you this. You know, we met back in 2017, and you have inspired me since then. And I think I spoke to you about this when I was on your show. Like, what does it mean for you to compete? And just for me, I've never been necessarily competitive. I've never been on like a team sport or anything. But this idea of continuous growth and using one another to grow stronger because of it. You're a speaker, I'm a speaker. I've been inspired by your content. You have pushed me to grow. And a lot of the stuff that we've talked about behind the scenes off camera has definitely added to my career. So thank you so much, Jake, for all you've done for me.
You bet, man. The word compete means to strive to gain or win something. And we
100%.
are all striving to make our impacts. And the way I look at it, if you'd asked me 15 years ago, I'm like, I'm out to beat everybody.
Yeah.
And I had a very unhealthy approach. And now I'm like, no, man, there's enough room on the stage. Let's all win together, because speaking industry is like a lot of other spaces. If you have the right perspective, it'll change your life. Because for me, I'm going to speak to a client this year. I may not speak to him again for 3 or 4 years. But if I know you and I know how hard you're working your tail off and I've seen your work, I can recommend you. So not only do I help you, which is my focus of how can I help others, I help my client. And I help everybody wins in that regard. And so 100%.
You recommended me to Staples. I spoke to, it was like 3,000 salespeople. I appreciate it.
It's all about how can more good people that are just striving to make an impact win and drown out the negativity and the people that only care about themselves. That's what we want.
I love it. And I think you're well on your way on accomplishing that mission. I'm certainly evidence of that. So Jake, tell our audience, how do we connect with you? How do we check out the book? How do we follow you? Tell us all this.
Yeah, easiest way to connect with me is competeeveryday.com. You'll find the podcast, book, speaking, all of that information will be on there. And then social media, I'll make it easy on you as well. Compete Every Day. Personally, if you want to connect with me, I'm most active on LinkedIn and then Instagram. And my Instagram's Jake Thompson Speaks. So I'll make it easy for you there.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to have all of his contact information in the show notes as well. So Jake, as always, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show.
Man, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of The Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next week on the next episode of The Pathways to Success.